the penguin paintings had this format, this quite unique format. You could really say anything you wanted in that middle panel because people were already used to the form of the penguin book. So in that way, the text carried more weight than the painting. I think there was a kind of a, you know, there was a sort of heavy emphasis on the text. And I noticed that once I'd started to like use a title in another version of one of those penguin classics, it would change the way in which the color change would change the way in which you read the title. You know, so I have a painting that says death. Death. What's in it for me? And the first one I did was pink, like a cerise actually. But we call it pink, you know. And that pink gave it a kind of levity, and it allowed people to kind of, you know, not really engage with death, but death as a kind of more of a carry-on idea of death, you know. So then, you know, I thought, well, you know, if you can change the form as well, then you can you change that, you can control that way in which people read the text that bit more. By changing the form, and also with these new works that are based on kind of psychology books from the 60s and the 70s. The text isn't like, it doesn't occupy that central panel. It's not really the first thing you see. People aren't familiar with the books because I made them all up. So there isn't that sense that they're looking at something they're familiar with. Therefore, they're only going to read the text, which is something they're unfamiliar with, usually. So I think, you know, when people are looking at the paintings, well, firstly, I think they're looking at the paintings, then they read the text, you know. So I think the text is the secondary, it's something that happens in a secondary way. So then, you know, people start to create some kind of relationship between the text and the form and the colours in their own minds.